We've just moved from Italy to Switzerland. That is an 8.5-hour direct drive with the border in between. Italy is part of the EU and Switzerland is not. There was a fair amount of logistics involved in this move, and some of it I'm actually glad I was forced to do, like keeping a numbered list of all of my boxes, because it actually made things easier in the long run. So today I want to do a sort of post-mortem on all the lessons learned while it's still fresh in my head. Hello, I'm Kate and welcome back to my channel where I talk about productivity and organization. Today is going to be another video related to moving. I've done a couple house tours and one room planning video so far, more to come. Let's jump in with the planning and prep phase. This was a big move. I was moving myself and two small children, and we had been in the old apartment for 10 years and we had a storage unit too. So I started early around Easter. My mom was visiting then, so I was able to get some emotional support from her, and I was also able to send back with her some sentimental stuff that I wanted to hold on to, but I don't actually really need to keep with me. The first thing that I needed to do was come up with an estimate of how many boxes I would be moving total. The way I did this was I started by looking up a pretty standard sized box, like the kind you can buy, and then I kept that volume in my head. Then I just walked through the apartment one room at a time and added it all up. Like I looked at the closet and said, that's 2 boxes of clothes. The drawers underneath the bed full of toys are going to be 1 box each. And I actually got a list at the end that was pretty close to my final number, except for one big thing. A lot of the boxes that I ended up using were really small, like a third of the size of a regular box. So the actual end number was much higher, but the volume was pretty close. The reason that I needed this number was so that I could get an estimate from professional movers. The estimate ended up being more than 7,000 euros, so I didn't end up being able to go that route, but it was still really valuable talking to them so that I could compare my options and also to answer some of my questions about going through customs at the border. In the end, I hired my boyfriend, his cousin, and his nephew. He did the logistics and I did the paying. The expenses were the big rental van and hotels and meals for the 3 guys. They picked up the rental van in Switzerland, drove down to about an hour outside Rome, stayed one night in a hotel. The next day came into the city center where I live, packed up the van, finished by lunchtime, and then returned to that same hotel. They didn't want my belongings parked in the city overnight. So then the next day from the hotel, they left bright and early for the Swiss border, so they would be at customs during open working hours and make it here to our new home in time to do all of the unloading that same day. So 3 days, 2 nights for the move itself. And then we still had the van the next day, and we used that next day to do a big IKEA and Mikasa run, picking up items we had already chosen to really make the most of the time that we had the van. My personal timeline, I sent my kids off to the beach with their noni the same day that the guys left from Switzerland. That was Tuesday, so I had one last day of big crazy packing without the kids. By a nice coincidence, there was a Saint-Day festival happening at the piazza at the end of my street. So that whole piazza was closed off for cars, including parked cars, for the couple days before the move, and opened up right the morning that the guys were arriving with the van. So we still weren't able to actually find a legal, like triple size parking spot, but we were able to get a nice spot that didn't block any streets or any other people. It ended up being a rainy day, which no one was prepared for. The guys brought like sunscreen, making Italy in the summer, and not a single umbrella or raincoat between them, which is quite shameful for the Swiss, who say that there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing. But we were lucky and finished by lunch, and the rain held off until right when we were eating. More on this later, but I was shocked and even disgusted with myself by how much I have. We filled that big moving van all the way to the roof. Yeah, I just didn't expect that. And everything had to fit or not come. There's no doing a second trip like you would moving a shorter distance. That night I had one last nice Italian dinner at my favorite restaurant, a vegetarian place called Margutta. That's like right in the heart of the historical center. Via Margutta is where Gregory Peck lives in Roman Holiday. I slept that night in my mostly but not completely empty apartment. My ex is taking it back over, and I didn't move almost any furniture. And the next day, Thursday, around noon, the cat and I went to the airport to fly up and meet our stuff in Switzerland. We were actually unsure who would get here first, me or the boys with the van. But in the end, my flight was delayed and a train got canceled, and it ended up taking me like all day for what should be like a really quick 90-minute flight trip. So by the time I got here, they had finished unloading eaten a nice dinner, and we're actually all already gone by the time I got here. I had made sure that I had everything I needed for the next 24 hours like in my airplane carry-on bag with me, because I didn't want to get here and like be hunting through boxes to find something to sleep in that night. Because even though the build up to that day, that move had been huge, still couldn't relax yet. We had the van for another half day and we wanted to take advantage of that. I want to backtrack to everything happened between Easter when packing started and the move itself, which was Wednesday, June 14th. There was a fair amount that I was able to pack up months in advance, like books, stuff in my storage unit, like my pasta maker. And then 1 month out, I said to myself, I'm not gonna bake a cake between now and when we move. So then I was free to pack up all my pans and my cake decorating stuff, cookbooks. And then it got warmer and I could pack up the wintry clothes. So you get the idea. The closer it got, the more I was free to pack up without missing it. But there was still a lot left at the very end, the stuff that we use on a regular basis. And when I got to that point, when I could see how much stuff, how many boxes there already were, then I really wished I had gotten rid of more back when I was packing the less used stuff, but then that stuff had already been packed for ages. Especially with those earlier boxes of less used things, I wasn't just like putting stuff in a box, I was going through a category of possession and cleaning it and deciding if I was gonna take it with me, all of it, some of it, and then if so, packing it up. It was mentally draining, emotionally draining, and physically draining work. I spread it out over 3 months, and still at the very end, I was doing this all day, every day, and I do not think I could have done it any faster. My only regret in the process was that I didn't get rid of more stuff earlier on, in the process, going through my things. When I got rid of those first couple boxes of kitchen stuff that I knew I didn't need to use on a regular basis, the kitchen was so much nicer to like have that little extra space, not have things stacked on top of each other. Yeah, I think I would rather have a kitchen like that than I would have those other things. But I'll go back to the minimalism stuff later at the end of the video. I love to know other people's moving regrets. If you want to like leave them in the comments, I really would just like love to read them. For packing materials, I didn't buy any boxes. I'm just too cheap for that. So I just went to the supermarket around the corner and asked if I could have the boxes that they were finished with, and they thanked me for taking them. I bought a big thing of a whole bunch of paper masking tape. I love masking tape. It's so easy to like use it and just rip it if you need to. I think some people think plastic tape is stronger, but if the tape on a box fails, like one of two things. You either made that box too heavy. Remember, humans have to lift up the boxes. They can't be super, super heavy. And also, when the tape on a box fails, it's probably not like the tape itself that ripped, it's probably the connection between the tape and the box that failed. And in my experience, like the plastic tape and the paper tape attached to the box with the same amount of stickiness. I also used green masking tape or painter's tape for all of my labels, so they stood out really well. Every box was labeled with a number and a destination room, and the few that were destined to go right into the new cellar also had the contents, like for example, like Kait winter clothing. The only other packing material I bought was plastic wrap. This stuff is light, like the kitchen food wrap, but wider and a bit thicker. I loved having this stuff and was so glad I bought it. I actually ran out on the very last day and did finish up with the regular kitchen stuff in the end. I have a lot of storage boxes that I used as moving boxes, and the plastic wrap protected them because I knew they would end up being like lifted up and put on the ground in different places. And I didn't want all my storage boxes because, storage boxes are expensive to get like scratched up and dirty and ruined. I also wrapped any boxes that had clothing in them that were going to be going in my old basement storage unit. We've had some problems with mold in that storage unit, and it still kind of smells. And the last thing I wanted right after the move was to have to wash every single piece of clothing we own because it all had like a musty smell to it. And the mattresses, I just like wrapped them up the whole way, and then I didn't have to worry about them getting soiled during the move. So you may notice I didn't get any bubble wrap. I had some laying around and I used it, but mostly I used clothing and towels as my packing material between fragile stuff. It worked great and was a much better use of volume than if a third of my boxes were all bubble wrap. The only boxes that were all clothing without something fragile kind of hidden in the middle were the boxes that were gonna go right into the new cellar storage area. Those boxes, I wanted to be able to just bring them right into storage without having to like touch them, without having to go through them. So while I was packing, I was also maintaining a list of every single box numbered, all of its contents, and an estimated resale value too. You can't just bring a truck of stuff from Italy into Switzerland. The assumption is that it's cargo meant to be sold, so you would have to pay taxes on it. If you live there or are moving there, you can bring your personal belongings without paying taxes, but you still need to declare it. hence the list. If you're a Swiss citizen, then you're definitely not gonna have to pay taxes at the border. If you're like me and applying for a visa but don't have one yet, then a few different things could happen depending on who's working the border that day. The worst case scenario would have been I'd had to have paid taxes at the border, but then once I got my visa and proved that I was living here, I could have gotten reimbursed. Like many national borders, a lot depends on the border agent working that day, how they feel and what they think about you. So we needed to prepare a lot of stuff. I had 2 copies of my new lease, my Italian citizen documents, listed every box and its contents, value, and some forms. And we had 1 copy for the Italians and 1 copy for the Swiss. And remember, me and the cat flew, so it was my boyfriend who was gonna have to deal with the custom agents. I guess they looked very credible because they were actually just waved right through and didn't have to show anything. Everyone was very happy that the van made it through the border without any trouble. Even though we did all of that work preparing all the documents like for nothing, we could have needed it, so we were really glad that it just went through easily. So jumping forward in time, it has been almost exactly 1 month since the move itself, and as you can see by my background, everything is not away yet. That would be the biggest lesson learned from this move. Do not assume that you will unpack everything quickly. Assume that you're going to be living out of your boxes for a few weeks, even months. This room is the office, and it's the last room that really looks like a mess. It's a mess because we haven't bought our new office furniture yet, so there's nowhere to put anything. My first priority was my kids' room. My last video was all about that room, and that was a really fun project. And I also unpacked the kitchen pretty quickly. The first few days, we just ate out all of our meals. But the kitchen was easy because the kitchen cabinets are already there. Plus, I'm moving from a smaller kitchen to a bigger one, which makes it a lot easier than the other way around. My bedroom furniture has been a downgrade in space, and that has been a lot harder to figure out how to fit this much stuff into this much space. In the kitchen, I used painter's tape and labeled all of the cabinets. And that has been really useful now while this kitchen is new and unfamiliar. And it also gives me license to change my mind. So if I decide, oh, I don't actually like this here, I want to put it there, I can move it and just also move the label. And I'm not then later on like checking every single cabinet every time I want to find something. Our living room, if you saw the house tour video I did of the whole apartment, is really the jewel of this whole apartment. And we ordered our couch pretty quickly as soon as I got here at the end of June, but it's not going to be ready until October. So for now, we have 2 blow-up kind of like recliners with matching stools and an empty box for a coffee table. I really want to get furniture that I love for that space, which probably means waiting until we can see the couch like in the space until we decide what to get. So for now, there's storage bins along the wall. It doesn't look terrible and it's certainly functional. That big room is where most of the boxes have been sitting and waiting during this past month to be waiting to be unpacked. Well, there and also here in the office. So while things are still shifting a lot, most of our belongings at this point are at least close to their final resting place. Until just a few days ago, we were still in the phase where several times a day, we would need something specific and then it would be a hunt to find out what box it's in. Of course, the first days, that was happening all the time, but the more that got unpacked, the less it was happening. This is where that numbered list really saved me. Boxes that have like a single-digit number, I know that I packed those months ago, and then I can safely ignore them for a little bit longer. And the boxes that have the very highest numbers, I know those contain the items that I held off packing until the very end. But for when you want a specific thing, the list was amazing. Pretty much every time, whatever I wanted, I could look at the list and see, oh, what I need is in box like 103. And finding box 103 wasn't even that hard because we divided the boxes by room. So it wasn't like I'm finding a box out of 100. It was just whatever boxes were left, like, you know, if it was an office box I was just looking at, the office boxes that still hadn't been unpacked yet. Again, and I really want to emphasize this, I was/have been in that living out of boxes phase for weeks. I was so focused on packing that I didn't think much about what unpacking was going to be like. I prioritized volume and cushioning over like making sure each box just contained X, which I don't regret. I packed my moving van to the roof, so I prioritized the right things. But I'm really glad that I have my detailed list. So lastly, I want to circle back to the idea of minimalism, which I touched on a few times. I don't consider myself a minimalist by any means, but I think the process of moving and touching all of your possessions and seeing them all together really brings out a bit of the minimalist in all of us. Also, I talked about going through all of our things. You don't need to be moving to do that, but moving really forces us to prioritize it. When normally going through a box of stuff you don't need that's sitting perfectly happily in a place that you don't look, like of course that's not gonna be a priority. I didn't do much selling this move, but when I moved from San Francisco to Rome 13 years ago, I sold a lot of stuff then, including, and I remember this exactly, a mirror that I had put in the back of the closet and never hung up and had sat there in the closet the entire time I lived in that apartment. I could and should have sold that mirror before I was also dealing with the stress of moving, but of course I didn't. And some items I sold for the same value as new. So if I didn't want them in my apartment, there really is no reason that I kept them for so long. So my goal is to hold on to this feeling that has been revived by going through the process of moving and keep making not full minimalism, but maybe like reductionism, a regular part of my life. And to remember that every single thing I have, I am paying to store it. Even a shirt in the closet or a dish in the kitchen, I am paying more rent to have a bigger bedroom and a bigger kitchen. And even every bookcase I add, I'm losing some floor space. I'm an organization nut, and it's been really fun to plan out each room and find ways I can improve upon my old systems. Where can I take advantage of having more space, which is the case in the kitchen, and where can I optimize to fit into a smaller space, which is the case in the bedroom. Going to be a lot of seasonal switching for that one. I'll be making more organizational videos as I keep working my way through that, so subscribe to follow along on the journey. And thank you for watching all the way to the end. Very few people make it all the way to the end of YouTube videos, so hug. And check out my next one, I'll put it on the screen. Ciao.